The Nile has always been more than a river. It is a thread that has bound civilizations, defined empires, and shaped destinies. For centuries, its waters carried both life and conflict. During the colonial era, European powers carved treaties that favored Egypt, locking Ethiopia out of its own river. Decades later, the injustice still echoes, a silent current, flowing beneath every political debate about the Nile. Ethiopia's spiritual upbringing is deeply rooted in moral storytelling. Children were taught through tales of light and darkness, heaven and fire, that doing good brings peace and evil leads to torment. Among these ancient stories is one of Satan's deceit. When the sinner begs for fire, he is thrown into ice. When he asks for water, he is cast into flame. It is a parable of contradiction, one that mirrors Egypt's dilemma today. When they say fire, it becomes water, and when they say water, it becomes fire. The story repeats itself, not in folklore this time, but in the modern world. Egypt once cried drought, and now it cries flood, both blamed on Ethiopia's grand Renaissance dam, the GERD, a symbol of progress for one, and of fear for another. As nature reshapes its path, Egypt searches for someone to accuse. Just a week after Egypt announced its plan to take Ethiopia to international court for causing water shortages, an unexpected flood swept across the Nile Delta. Towns were submerged, farmlands drowned. Yet astonishingly, Egypt still pointed to the same dam, the same structure it accused of stealing its water, and declared it the cause of the flood. In Meshufia Governorate, northern Egypt, homes were swallowed by rising waters. Citizens fled as officials urged immediate evacuation. Egypt's Minister of Water and Irrigation blamed the GERD for unleashing the floodwaters, but Ethiopia, in a calm yet firm tone, rejected the claim, calling it a distortion of reality. They even argued that without the dam, this year's flood could have been catastrophic. Ethiopia's statement carried an unusual weight. It is time for Egypt to accept the new reality. Those words spoke not just of water, but of history, a demand to abandon the colonial mindset that granted Egypt supremacy over the Nile. But such transitions are never easy. Egypt's sense of entitlement to the river runs deep, carved by generations of policy and pride. It's almost ironic. The same river that once separated kingdoms now connects their conflicts. Egypt's threats of lawsuits are not new, but this time, they carry echoes of desperation. The first time Ethiopia faced such a case was decades ago, the border dispute with Eritrea. That case ended with loss. Now history seems to circle back, with Egypt taking its turn at the court's gates. What happens if Egypt wins, and what happens if it doesn't? That's where the world's attention lingers. Egypt says it will go to international arbitration, arguing that Ethiopia's dam endangers the lives of millions downstream. But the law, it seems, isn't entirely on their side. Ethiopia responded during the UN General Assembly in New York, denying any wrongdoing, and reminding the world that development should never be mistaken for aggression. Egypt, angered, doubled down, portraying itself as the victim of an existential threat. But in truth, the threat may be more political than natural. Dr. Yonatan Astifa, a legal expert, explains it clearly. Egypt cannot simply sue because it faced drought or flood. Arbitration requires consent. Both sides must agree. Without Ethiopia's approval, the case cannot proceed. It's a chessboard where every move requires permission, and Ethiopia holds more pieces than Egypt admits. Experts say Egypt's real motive might be to buy time, to show its citizens it's still fighting for the Nile. After all, domestic frustration is growing, and blaming the dam helps calm the waters of public anger. But deep down, Cairo knows that Ethiopia's hand on the river cannot be pried loose. Here's where you, the viewer, come in. If two nations share one river, who truly owns it? The one at its source, or the one that drinks from its flow? Tell us your thoughts below. This question, more than any lawsuit, will shape how the world sees justice on the Nile. Legally, Ethiopia's case is strong. International law favors equitable and reasonable use, not monopoly. The days when colonial treaties could define water rights are gone. Egypt's argument, rooted in history, may not stand in a modern court guided by fairness and sustainability. Yet pride, not logic, drives most empires to repeat their mistakes. Diplomatically, Egypt's latest push seems influenced by a new interpretation of international law, one that holds nations accountable if their projects harm another's environment. Egypt's lawyers hope to use this to link the GERD to climate disruption, perhaps to secure compensation. It's a clever move, but a fragile one. To prove harm, Egypt must first prove that Ethiopia's dam, rather than natural forces, caused the flood. And nature doesn't keep receipts. For Ethiopia, the path forward is clear, but steep. Experts urge the government to unite environmental scientists, engineers, and legal scholars to prepare for any possible trial. The Nile, after all, is more than a river. It's a test of Africa's unity and sovereignty. Every drop carries memory, resistance, and rebirth. Egypt's problem, in the end, is not the GERD. It's the shifting balance of power. For centuries, the Nile was Egypt's unquestioned lifeline. Now that current runs through Ethiopia's hands, and the old hierarchy trembles. The world watches as two ancient nations wrestle over water, history, and identity itself. When Ethiopia began filling the GERD reservoir, Egypt called it an act of aggression. When it delayed filling to avoid floods, Egypt called it manipulation. The paradox is almost poetic. When they say fire, it becomes water. When they save water, it becomes fire. The parable of contradiction has come full circle. The next days may bring legal filings, diplomatic statements, or quiet backroom deals, but beneath them all flows a truth older than any court. The Nile obeys no flag. If you found this story eye-opening, subscribe for more deep breakdowns of global power and history, because sometimes, water tells the truest story of all.